afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to Dr. Cronin. Welcome to the faculty seminar on integrating OER, Open Educational Resources, and adopting open educational practices, OEP, in authentic e-learning experiences. This is the fifth webinar of a series of faculty seminars organized by the Faculty of Education of the Open Institute of Sri Lanka. In relation to its faculty continuing professional development program on authentic teaching, learning and assessment strategies for open and distance learning, acronymed as ATLAS for ODL. And on behalf of the Faculty of Education, I'm very happy to welcome you all to this webinar. And I would like to warmly welcome Dr. Catherine Cronin, who has very kindly agreed to conduct today's webinar on integrating OER and adopting OEP in authentic e-learning experiences. It's my great pleasure to present a brief introduction about Dr. Cronin. Dr. Catherine Cronin is a strategic education developer at Ireland's National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. In this role, Catherine works collaboratively across the higher education sector and to support digital and open education, including the use of open education resources and open education practices, that is OER and OEP, developing of enabling policies for digital and open teaching and learning, and leading a national digital experience survey. Catherine has been teaching online since 1995, and she was the academic coordinator for the first fully online degree program at the National University of Ireland in Galway. In 2018, Catherine completed her PhD, exploring the benefits, risks, and tensions of using open educational practices, OEP, in higher education. She regularly and openly publishes her work, focusing on critical approaches to digital and open education. Catherine is a regular contributor to conversations and collaborative projects in the area of open education within Ireland and globally, particularly as an advocate for critical approaches to open education and the creation of equitable collaborative spaces to enhance learning and improve lives. I met Catherine at open education conferences and have been professionally associated with her with our mutual interest, research interest in OER and OEP. And very recently, Catherine did the webinar for Commonwealth of Learning, Open Doors, only last week. I think some of you also would have joined it, which was a very good webinar on OEP from a different approach. So today, I'm very grateful to Dr. Catherine Cronin for accepting our request to share some thoughts on integrating OER and adopting OEP in authentic e-learning experiences. Actually, we had discussions from this since last November, and today was the only free day I could get from her. So you could imagine how busy she is. So anyway, I'm very glad that you have, despite your all other commitments, you agreed to do this webinar for us today. So Catherine, I kindly invite you now to commence the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shironika, for such a very warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here. You mentioned that I'm busy, probably no more so than you all. These are very busy times for online and distance educators. So I'm honored to be here. So thank you so much. I will share my screen to get started. As you mentioned, I work for the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education here in Ireland. And for anyone that's not familiar with this, we are Ireland's national body responsible for leading and advising on the enhancement of teaching and learning in Irish higher education, which sounds very lofty. We're actually quite a small group. And the way that we work is we work collaboratively across the sector with all of the higher education institutions in Ireland, colleges, universities, technological institutions. And we do this through projects and initiatives and funding and even unfunded projects. So, so it's a very satisfying work to do, particularly over the course of the last year, as you can imagine. I might ask Sharonika if you would mind sharing the link here in the chat. I'd just like to make clear that this presentation and the list of resources which you'll find at the open document here are themselves open educational resources that I share with you today. So you're welcome to, to use parts of them, adapt them, take them apart, remix them as you wish. Basically, my intention is to share some general information, some specific examples, and I understand that those will only be useful to you insofar as they relate to your own context and your students and your teaching. So I feature examples from a range of different contexts because we all learn from each other. So over the course of the webinar, this is my plan in discussion with Sharonika about what might be useful today. So there's a brief introduction about OER and OEP. And then I think it's important to establish the rationale for OER and OEP before getting into the nuts and bolts of different examples. So I have a brief section about why we engage in OER and OEP. And then I have some very specific examples from around the world about how people are integrating OER and OEP in their teaching today, a particular focus on 2020. Because things changed so dramatically last year. And then there's an opportunity for you to speak with each other about your own particular challenges and possibilities. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. And the end of the presentation is an appendix that I won't go through in real time today, but there's further examples for you, hopefully, that might be helpful after today's presentation. So first is just the introduction. And I know this will be old news for many of you, particularly since you have Sharonika and other OER experts in your midst. But the definition of OER is remarkably consistent since the term was coined in 2002. And this particular definition from UNESCO, there are others from Hewlett and so on. But basically, we know OER are teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, they don't have to be digital, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no-cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others, with no restrictions or limited restrictions. So as I often explain when working with people, you as the creator retain the copyright, of course, or whatever the terms of copyright are as a educator in your institution. And the open license just sits on top of the resource that you create, because particularly if it's a digital resource, it can go anywhere in the internet. Anyone might find the infographic you've created, the assignment, the book, the course, the lesson, whatever it might be. But with the open license with it, whoever encounters that resource knows exactly how they will be permitted to reuse it. So it's just a set of permissions. If it doesn't have that open license, it also can travel around, online or offline, but anyone who wishes to reuse it or repurpose it would have to get permission from you to do that. So it's a proactive, generous act on the part of the creator of any resource, particularly education resources, to enable them to be used readily. And another way that people, of course, describe these permissions of OER is David Wiley's 5 Rs. And that is, we have the permission to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and or redistribute. So this is very, very powerful, obviously, in the terms of educational resources. But when we speak about the power or the potential of open education, it isn't just about the things or the content, but it's really what we can do with them, obviously. So this is where the term OEP, or open educational practices, come in. So open educational practices, if you like, is a bigger umbrella, which includes the use, reuse, and creation of OER, but also what that enables in terms of teaching and learning. So in this definition, it's the collaborative pedagogical practices which typically employ social and participatory technologies for interaction, peer learning, knowledge creation and sharing, and empowerment of learners. So again, I think this may be quite a review for many of you because you'll be familiar with OER and OEP. So what I might do at this stage is launch a quick poll just to find out, you know, how you engage with OER and OEP. Now, there we are, polling. Okay. Okay, so the first poll question is this one, and you can tick all of the options that apply, as it says here. So regarding your OER practice, which options apply to you? And I'll just leave this open for about 20 seconds, if you wouldn't mind ticking as many as apply to you. Wonderful, thank you everyone. Okay, I'll leave just a few more seconds. Okay. See if we can get to, no, there we are, 26 people. Wonderful. So I hope you can see the results there. The largest proportion is people who use OER. This is wonderful. More than 2/3 of people use OER. Just under a quarter of people say they have no OER practice, but they're interested. So that's great. It just shows that we have a diverse group of people here today. 15% of you create and share OER. Many of you support others in using OER. Almost 1/3 of you use OER and OEP in your teaching. A few people help to create policy. I will mention policy today. And some of you are also doing research in the OER. Fantastic, thank you. Okay, I am going to move on to the second poll now. This is a series of very quick poll questions here. For a variety of reasons, many of us may face barriers in using open educational resources and open educational practices. And over the course of the literature, these are some of the factors. I'm not sure. You can leave out slightly and not at all. You can just look at the first two and the last three. I'm not sure what happened in that poll there. So, do any of these apply to you? Barriers to using OER and OEP. And apologies for the two options in the middle there if they're causing confusion. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end the poll and share it now. Okay, overwhelmingly, it looks like the top barrier is difficult to find relevant quality OER. 3/4 of people say that. 1/4 of people are not sure about copyright law and open licensing. Some people find it difficult to obtain support for using OER and OEP. Not sure that students will readily accept using OER, and not sure that students can engage in OEP, again, for various reasons. Okay, I think that's really helpful. I hope that you find it interesting as well, just understanding more information about your peers, but I'll leave the polls for now. And what I'd like to do now is, as Sharonika mentioned, is just do a brief, this will take 5 minutes only, but it's a brief reflective exercise called a spiral journal exercise. It only takes 5 minutes. I'll explain how it works. And then I've put some links there. So after the fact, this might be something that you might want to do with your own students. But what we'll need to do before we start is just get a piece of paper. I just have a piece of A4 paper here. And I'm just, whatever size paper it is, it doesn't matter. If it has lines, it's fine. If this is just for your own notes. And I'm going to ask you to fold it into 4, like this. And then just to open it out. So you have kind of 4 boxes on your paper. Okay, and then I'm just going to share 5 different short questions with you. And each of those questions, I will set the timer for 1 minute. So again, this is just a reflective exercise. I'm not going to ask you to share the results of this afterwards with a small group or with the large group. Later in the session today, we'll be in breakout rooms and you may use these reflections, but they're really strictly for you. Okay, so I'm going to go to the first now and start my timer. So as it says here, this just simply asks you to put your pen or pencil in the very center where the 4 squares meet and very slowly draw a continuous tight spiral on your page just for 1 minute. Okay, that's a chance to really just pause in silence. And now I'll present the first question to you. It's been a momentous year. In the upper left quadrant of your page, if you can just jot some notes for yourself about, over the past year, one thing I learned about myself as an educator is, and I'll leave this for 1 minute. Okay, thank you very much. The next question in the upper right is now thinking more about the topic that we're here together to discuss today. The biggest challenge I have in using OER and OEP in my teaching is, thank you. The third question, again, 1 minute, is I see potential for using OER or OEP in my teaching in this way. Thank you. And the final question, one goal I have regarding OER and OEP is, this could be a goal you have maybe particularly just around this session this morning, or something broader in relation to perhaps a course you're teaching or some research you're doing. Okay, thank you so much. I hope it is useful for you just to have a very brief reflective time before we go into a very informative, 25 minutes or so now. As I said, this sheet is just for you. I'm not going to ask you to share anything specific. It's an example of a liberating structure, and the link is on the Spiral Journal slide. Again, you can look into that afterwards. Normally what happens in this case is that there's a wrap up. Perhaps we go into breakout rooms in pairs for 2 minutes and people share something, and then we come back to the large group. But for today's wrap up, I'm just going to ask you to keep your sheet close by you, and you might choose to make further notes as we go through the session today. And then those notes might be useful when we go into the breakout room later. Okay. So as I said, I think it's really tremendously useful to start out with the rationale for OER and OEP before we get into the nuts and bolts of how we do it. So I think there's probably no better place to start than with this, and that is that, as UNESCO describes here, we are experiencing a pivotal moment in history. Our world changed dramatically over the course of the past year, as individual human beings, as parents, as children, as people in our communities, as well, of course, as educators. But UNESCO called to mind specifically our role as educators in using OER to facilitate education at this pivotal moment of history. So as it says here, UNESCO calls on the global community to support the use of open educational resources for sharing learning and knowledge openly worldwide with a view to building more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient knowledge societies. And this was published in April of this year. And, as I've said before, I think this is a very strong call to action to us as educators. So whatever experience we may have had with OER before, there's just a bright spotlight now, because of the pandemic and what OER can afford, at this particular moment in history. But OER, of course, is just one aspect of the broader domain of open education. And there are many, many definitions of open education, but I share two here. Sanjay Mishra, I think, has a lovely, elegant definition of open education where he says it's basically fairness, flexibility, and freedom. So fairness is a focus on equity and social justice. Flexibility is a focus on learner autonomy and agency in their learning. And freedom links back to David Wiley's 5 R's that I talked about before. So the ability to use open resources to make them relevant, in our own context and for our own students. And as I mentioned, Shironika is, I know so much about the Open University in Sri Lanka purely through Shironika's work in OER and OEP. I'm grateful for that. And this definition here, I won't read it out to you, is a recent paper with Som Naidu, is really about open scholarship is built on, valuing the values of freedom, equity, and social justice, and this notion of the commons, that education really in its essence is about sharing, and open educational resources really make the most of that. So really briefly, I use, in speaking about the value of potential value of open and teaching and learning, I talk often about three values or three aspects. So we can increase access to education, improve equity, and enhance pedagogy. So really briefly, just again, this is just about the rationale. Of course, we know that open education and open educational resources specifically can increase access to education. So when students have access to OER, particularly in the form of open textbooks, they do not have to buy their textbooks. So it automatically increases the access to education for students. For teachers and all who support teaching and learning, the use of OER means that teachers who may have been thrown into teaching, online and remotely for the first time in their lives, don't have to develop all new digital resources. There's a wealth of OER available that can be reused and adapted, for specific contexts. And many resources around open education say that it's available to everyone, but of course we have to realize that, is it really available to everyone? In actual fact, generally open educational resources or open education tend to be available only to anyone with internet access and the knowledge and skills required. So teachers who use OER can reach students who don't have access. There are cases really where teachers who have access to the internet actually make hard copies of open educational resources for their students who don't have access. But the point here is that an important part of any discussion regarding OER is about the issue of equity. And that's the second aspect. So this is what some people talk about as the social justice focus of open education. So in the first instance, OER can reduce costs for students, as I've said. Open textbooks, open resources. We know in Ireland, for example, and I believe similar research has been done in many countries, that students, higher education students particularly, have experienced great financial hardship over the course of the past year. And some of that has been hardship on top of hardship they were already experiencing. So to the extent that we can reduce the costs of education for students, we're enhancing equity of education overall. There's the notion of persistent availability of resources. OER are available before a student takes a course, during it, of course, and also after they take the course. So they don't have to rely on having access codes for the library or access to an LMS or a VLE. That the access to those resources goes over the whole life of their time as a student, as well as before and after. And this is very important, particularly for those students who may have to take breaks in their studies. OER are also open for editing to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we've all come across resources, open and otherwise, which are not inclusive in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of culture, in terms of geography. Perhaps they're a North American focus. So if we use open educational resources, we as educators and students as well can adapt to those resources to make them relevant for our location, our students, our courses. And this is really powerful. And of course, OER can benefit people locally and globally, supporting Sustainable Development Goal number 4. And Sustainable Development Goal number 4, as you know, is about ensuring inclusive and quality education for all towards achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which has been very challenged by all that's happened in the past year. So what we do in the realm of education to support that Sustainable Development Goal is very important. And finally, and really the focus of today, is the third aspect, which is about enhancing pedagogy. The OER and OEP provide so many potential ways to enhance pedagogy. And just a few examples that are listed here. So as I already mentioned, we can adapt and use OER for our own particular context, our own students. So, changing resources that might be exclusive in some way or omit people in some way and make them inclusive and relevant to our students. Students can create and co-create OER with us, and I'm going to share a few examples of that in a few minutes. So this can empower students as co-creators of knowledge. It doesn't just have to be us as teachers sourcing open textbooks. Students can be involved in that process of sourcing, writing, and remixing them. Another thing that OER offers is support in the area of authentic assessment. I know this has been a focus of this webinar series about authentic learning and authentic assessment. Open education has a long history of examples of people who have used students developing materials for the open web, for the public, for their communities as very powerful examples of authentic assessment. So again, I'll share a few examples of those. And the fact that they're open unlocks that notion of authentic assessment even more powerfully. And that thereby students can contribute to public knowledge. The act of producing things for the open web means that we as educators and our students develop digital literacies that are part of lifelong learning literacies at the moment, about what do we need to know about copyright, about licensing, about creating for the web, about communicating on the web, and so on. So these are important digital literacies. We can diversify the curriculum if things are missing, perhaps things about local history, our country's system of law or education or other. We can diversify the curriculum, we can add those perspectives. And then the final one maybe is the most powerful of all, and that's the prospect of local and global collaboration. As I mentioned, I've collaborated and worked with Shironica, and that is because we are working on projects that are open. So it erases the boundaries of our own institutions, our own countries, and so on, and we can collaborate globally. And this has been, a particularly important way that I've folded OEP into my teaching. It enables us to connect our students with students in other countries and other areas to learn together. And as Bell Hooks says, this whole notion of education as the practice of freedom. So pedagogy is our focus today. These examples of pedagogy, I'll dive a little bit deeper into those. And I just want to note that, again, across the literature, the key principles of OEP and open pedagogy are probably these. OEP centers students as reflective creators, curators, and sharers of knowledge. It emphasizes collaboration and social learning. It is built into assessment activities, and it looks outward to the public and contributes to the public good. It, of course, varies by discipline, by level, by class size. You might be thinking of all these different challenges that you might face, by the digital literacies of the teacher and the students, by the resources available, including connectivity. But I invite you, just as I go through the examples, to share with you now to think about, how some of these might be relevant or able to map to your own practice and your own teaching. So just a few ideas, and then we'll have an opportunity to talk in breakout rooms. I've selected 3 areas. We don't have a lot of time together today. We'll make the most of the hour, but 3 areas that come up in conversation a lot and that Shironica mentioned, would be useful to pursue. So one is open textbooks, one is OER assignments, and another is editing Wikipedia. So what I'm going to do is share a few examples in each of these, and then we'll be able to have a conversation. So the first is open textbooks. This quote I'm sharing is from Glenda Cox and her collaborators at the University of Cape Town. They have a project called Dot for D, Digital Open Textbooks for Development. And this is, I should say about this slide, in all of the slides that I show here, there are hyperlinks. So afterward, you can go back. You see the names of the authors in 2020, that 2020 is hyperlinked to the paper that this quote came from. And then the Dot for D hyperlink is a hyperlink to the project. And on every slide that I share with you is built like this, so that, I can share a few thoughts now in this limited time that we have together, but afterwards you can go and dig a little bit more deeply if you wish. So what Glenda Cox and her collaborators have pointed out here is the empowering of academics and students in using open textbooks, and particularly in giving marginalized voices expression. So one of the critiques of the early open education movement was that MIT was the first university, for example, in Boston in the States, that released all of its courses as OER. And said, this is great, we can educate the world, but are those courses from Boston in the United States relevant to me in Ireland, you in Sri Lanka, you know, students in Cape Town or Vancouver or wherever? Perhaps not. Maybe in some ways, but not in others. So this whole notion of breaking open education so that authors and voices can come from all different locations, not just elite universities, particularly in the global north. So again, it empowers teachers, it empowers students, and makes sure that knowledge is truly global. So open textbooks are very powerful. The notion of co-creating open textbooks, there are two examples here. One is from CUNY, the City University of New York, and they actually, this quote here about zero textbook costs, they actually categorize all of the courses in their online course catalog as ZTC OER to let students know when they're choosing a module, if it has the code ZTC OER, then those course sections are those that do not require students to purchase a textbook, because they know from their work in this area of using open textbooks that this sometimes can be a deciding factor for students. That's one example of just actually categorizing courses and letting students know before they even pick their modules. And Robin DeRosa, who's done so much work in open education, including open textbooks, talks about how many people are attracted to open textbooks because they'll save students money, but that the pedagogical benefits to students as authors is hard to overestimate. And if I could just, let me just see here, if I move from my slide view to my web view here, I can actually just show you an example. So on this co-creating open textbooks page, I'm just going to click over. This is actually the link on that page to this open textbooks that was created by the students. So students and teachers, their lecturers, worked together to create this open textbook, What Open Pedagogy Taught Me About Myself. Colleges should reconstruct the unity of knowledge. So they've shared this open textbook with the world because they found it such a powerful experience. So again, I invite you to dig into that yourself. I will note that I have not shared in my added resources directories of open textbooks. There are many of those, and I hope this comes up in the Q&A, because I'm happy to share those, but I'm assuming that either in your faculty or in the library, you have access to those directories. But if you don't, I'm happy to share ones that I use. Okay, the next area is OER assignments. And this is Christina Hendricks in the University of British Columbia. And she talks about this notion of disposable assignments. This is a term coined by David Wiley. And he says that most of the assignments that we give to students are disposable. It's a private transaction between student and teacher. You write this, I will give you feedback and give you a grade, and then that work just goes off into the ether. So in OER assignments, we're saying, okay, let's use the same learning outcomes, let's make these authentic assessments, but let's actually share them publicly. Instead of pretending that we're going to be, giving a presentation in the style of something that you would give, in a business setting, let's actually share it in a business setting or a community setting. And this is the notion of OER assignments. So I have 3 examples here. And again, I'm not using my slide view because I want to share the actual examples with you in these tabs I have open. The first is Jen Ross at the University of Edinburgh. As you can see, I'm popping all over the world for these examples. And she talks about the Digital Futures for Learning course in an MSc program in digital education. And they've been using OER assignments actually for many years at the University of Edinburgh. And she says that they're really powerful because they're for an audience beyond the tutor. And again, this gets back to this notion of creating digital literacies. Students have to think not just about their audience, but about licensing, accessibility, tagging, and so on. And she provides some examples. The second may be interesting for those of you who are teaching educators or people who are going to be teachers, and this is shared by Bonnie Stewart in Canada at the University of Windsor. And she wrote a very conversational blog post and says, if you want a better web, you have to help build a better web, right? And part of that is building the critical literacies around ed tech platforms and tools among educators, from primary, secondary, all the way up to higher ed. So she and her students who are training to be teachers developed something called UWin Tool Parade, University of Windsor Tool Parade. And this is what it looks like in YouTube. and they actually created, these were their assignments, they created short videos where they assessed various tools. So assessed Twitter, they assessed Zoom, they compared Kahoot and Mentimeter. So not only are the students demonstrating their ability to, to do this critical analysis, but they're creating resources that are useful for teachers, students, and others, really around the world. Okay, fantastic. And can you see this now, the various images of the videos?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, apologies for that. So back to the slide. These are the students that I talked about, and this is the gallery of their various videos. So these are, again, undergraduate students who are training to be teachers. They're in an education program, and these were their assignments to do these videos, either collaboratively or individually. But in doing so, they demonstrated their critical literacies and their ability to create these videos and communicate effectively. But they've also shared a resource for us as well. So I think that's a really lovely example of student-created OER. It was their assignment, but it's also a resource. Am my slides moving? Can you see, and still we rise?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great. So this is the third example of a student-created OER, and this was a group of students at a state university in New York, a public university in Plattsburgh, upstate New York. And this was a lovely project of collaboration between students, their lecturers, and librarians. And they actually dove into the archives of their institution, which is an old institution, and looked at speakers who came to speak about racial justice at their institution. And then they created a blog, a public blog, to share it with the community and more widely. So here's an example of the And Still We Rise blog. Again, this was an assignment for students, and it involved collaboration, communication, and creating a resource that we can look at today, as well as fulfilling the requirements for their assignments. Okay, and finally, the third one, I'm just keeping an eye on time here, is Wikimedia in the curriculum, or editing Wikipedia rather, which is another example of OER assignments, but it's a particular kind of one. So these are people who have actually embraced the fact that so many people use Wikipedia across the world, and why not get students to edit and create articles in Wikipedia. So, two people I've quoted here. Ewan McAndrew is the Wikimedian in residence at the University of Edinburgh. He said, let's not complain about Wikipedia. Let's not just cite Wikipedia. Let's write Wikipedia. And another Wikipedia editing project in the States specifically uses it to empower students to think of themselves as authors and contributors. And there are examples, if you follow the links in these cases that I've shared, where students have had thousands of reads of some of the articles that they've edited and created. Okay, perhaps there were some sparks in some of the ideas I shared. Perhaps you may think some of them are relevant, some of them are not, but this is where I now turn the lens over to you and the microphone over to you. And I'm going to ask you to the challenges and possibilities in a specific way. And in just a moment, Sharonika will ask you to go into breakout rooms. And Sharonika, can you just tell me how much more time we have left? Is it about 20 minutes altogether? Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Apologies for going over, but I understand there was a discussion going on in the rooms. Delighted to hear that. So if I could, I'd like to just go from breakout room 1 to 7 and just maybe ask one person from each room just to give a 1 minute, if you could, 1 minute summary, perhaps of everything, or maybe some of the key things that came up in your group. So could I ask someone from breakout room 1 to start?
Dr. Catherine. So in breakout room 1, we discussed about the ways in which we can adopt OER and OEP in our professional practice in our university setting. So the group members talked about how OER can be used for both teaching and learning, and also for evaluation purposes. And also there was one question about the let's say, the validity, or maybe let's say, whether Wikipedia can be used as a learning resource. So that concern was there. Those are the major points.
Okay, that's great. What I might do, if there's questions for me, I'm just going to record them, and then we can do, I'll cover that in the Q&A afterwards, but thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay.
Breakout room 2.
Yes, madam. We also discussed regarding the OER practices and possibilities. So actually, some regarding our course revision, already we are practicing the and we use the some resources, and our major concern is actually we use some OER links, but now when we are checking the resources, sometimes it some resources expire and something. So it's the major concern. Another concern is regarding the student attitude. So we are conducting large number of students in PGD programs and the primary programs. So how we can then students regarding their attitudes, and how can they practice the OER? This is the problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That's useful. And I'll come back to the questions. Breakout room 3.
Let me, we didn't have, complete discussion, but well, we were discussing 2 things. One is the this idea, which is now on the chat as well, about you translating Wikipedia articles. But we spend more time discussing. The question is why in this country, at least, the government hasn't come out and said that connectivity to all students is a priority. I mean, finally, of course, some kind of internet connectivity, but initially it can be done by moving AV materials in some lower tech ways, such as DVDs or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's a huge issue, I understand.
Quality of learning.
Breakout room number 4.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This is Kediswaran from Education Faculty. We learn regarding this for staff that we got that it's importance of this OER material last year, 2020, and also I searched several times regarding this OER material in relation to my field of special education, but there are a lack of resources, quality resources in relation to this field of special education. And also we discussed regarding we have to take the responsibility to develop OER in our field, and also we have a large numbers of students in our mother tongue, that's Sinhala and Tamil. Therefore, we want to take this into our mother tongue. So these are the things we discuss.
Okay, very useful. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Breakout room number 5.
Now I am Dr. Ajira from room number 5. So our major concern is how we can maintain the quality of learning when we integrate OER and adapting OEP in authentic e-learning experiences. So we discuss how we can maintain this quality. Then others' viewpoint is, first of all, student and the tutor both should know, both should have a proper understanding about the nature of the OER and its features. And it's a big challenge for the tutor also when tutor going to use this this OEP in within the assessments. So it's a big challenge. because at least we should have a proper rubrics or guidelines to make the student, to raise the students' awareness about this OER. That is our viewpoints. It's a very good thing. If we now, as an assessment, if we guide the student to make their own OERs, it's good, and we can develop their creativity also. But we should be concerned about the quality of that products.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Group 6, there was only myself, I'm Tusita Jasuria, and Kalevani from Health Sciences. And there was yet another person, but he didn't correct. Maybe what we discussed, we are very new to this field because we have not integrated anything as much as the others, I think. But I think there's a potential there, especially for basic sciences. Only the basic sciences we can, most of the OERs are, we can use, but they need to be integrated into our curriculum. That's one problem, which we have to, because we can't use them as it is. Most of even the applied areas, even the areas we teach at a master's level cannot be integrated because it's more foreign, in the sense it's not within the tropical region. And of course, Kalevani was interested in converting courses, the existing courses, into OERs. She's in basic sciences, in the health sciences, and is again new to the thing, and we need to think about it. And integration of OERs is a problem for us. We need to get involved and go ahead. And also, I think preparing questions together with students is it's a good thing. And but I would like to read more about the products and how it progress in other areas, in other countries, because we usually don't, we get involved in setting questions, but we don't usually get students involved. So I think that's a good idea to proceed.
Okay, but that's really useful. Thank you. And I'll come back to a couple of things you mentioned. And then finally, so thanks again. Finally, breakout room 7.
I'm Sudarshan from room number 7. So actually, we discuss about the importance of the OER and the barriers and or the difficulties. So the most important thing that we discuss is how to overcome these barriers. So actually that barriers means that relevancy or the quality. So that we discuss the importance, I mean that we should produce, we can produce quality and relevance OER for our needs and wants, so that then we can publish them for the use of others also. So that's also very plus point what we discuss here.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. I have a couple of notes here for the Q&A. I might just share my screen just for one moment. You can see the 4 boxes?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I just to wrap up the presentation and let you know what's in the resources, and then I will return to your questions. So I really, really appreciate the comments and the questions, and obviously there was good discussion going on, and hopefully this kind of discussion will be going on for you, beyond this session. And I also want to say that I'm happy to engage either on Twitter or email or whatever if I can be helpful afterwards. A finding from my own research, just hopefully maybe to allay some fears or concerns that people may have, is that engaging in open educational practice is not a binary thing. I think you know, it's not like you're open or you're a closed educator. And even myself, who's been engaged in this for very many years, in my research, I characterized engagement in OEP as these four things. It's complex, it's personal, because when we step outside the LMS or the VLE, we're engage on the public web, in Wikipedia or otherwise. We must create our own accounts and persona and profiles in various places on the web. So we need to think about this as individuals and also how to support our students doing that. But it's part of digital citizenship in this century and in this time. So it's important that we practice it while students are with us. It's contextual, so I know it'll be different in health sciences than education, than social work, than engineering. It'll be different in Sri Lanka to Ireland. You know, there's so many ways that context affects how we enact open educational practices, and it's continually negotiated. So, you know, every time that I share something, I think about how I'm sharing it, where I'm sharing it, with whom, with what tags, and so on. So it's never something that's just tick the box and it's done. Each new time I develop something open, I negotiate how I'm going to share it and do it. And I'm very pleased to see the questions and the depth of the questions that has come up. And the only thing I would leave you with is the thought of encouraging this collaborative systemic approach. So of course we support individual students and individual teachers, but where OEP and OER can have sustainable effects within our institutions is if we move from, say, the upper left to the lower right here. If we move from individual practice to programs, to faculties, to institutions, and we really embed it in policy, in practice, bottom up and top down. So we need, you know, systemic and sustainable approaches to open. And that's the part that I'm working on a lot of my time at the National Forum about how we do that. And my last slide is just that I hope that despite recognizing the challenges and the barriers and everything, that there's a sense of hope about open education, because the community of people involved in open education globally, all of the people that I've cited in this presentation, are people that you could contact. If you see that question about open textbooks or that example from Bonnie Stewart, you could contact any of those people. This is the ethos of open, and say, you know, I saw that you're doing this with your students. I'd like to try it with mine. You know, can you help me? So I find working in this field, you know, immensely hopeful, and I hope that you feel some of that as well. And I would like to open it to Q&A now, and just to say that there's a whole list of resources at the end of the presentation that I invite you to explore in your own time. Would it be okay if I just went through a couple of the questions that came up? And because I've put some notes here.
Yes.
About the editing Wikipedia, I was really pleased to see the discussion in the chat. I know some of you know a lot about this, but you know, from my own experience of doing this with students and talking with other educators, the power of it isn't necessarily that we're saying that Wikipedia is a de facto source of information, but we're lifting the curtain of Wikipedia and teaching students about the history page, the edit page, so that they know when they go to it that it's just people, you know, adding things, and understanding those critical literacies. And as was mentioned in the chat, adding academic references. It is often easier to edit existing articles than to add new articles as new contributors to Wikipedia. So, but if you look up Wikimedian in Residence, there's actually a Wikipedia page for Wikimedian in Residence, all the people who work as Wikimedians in educational institutions. You can see where they are in every country in the world, and they post lots of helpful resources. Where resources expire, that was Breakout Room 2. I think we really need to embrace, you know, the 5 R's that we talked about. Redistribute means that you can download the resource, edit it, and if it's a really important resource in your course, I would not rely on a live link. I would actually download the resource, you know, and store it locally so that you can redistribute it. That's one of the 5 R's. In terms of quality and developing OER, I think, you we need to think about quality in many ways, both in terms of the inherent quality of production, but also the quality in terms of inclusiveness and equity. So let's encourage students to share their work, as well as share work ourselves. And in terms of assessing, the assessment came up a number of times. What I've done with students when they share things on the open web is I work with them before that assessment to co-develop the rubric. So when they were developing web resources, for example, we co-developed the rubric. So I didn't just hand it to them and say, this is how I will assess you. They actually engage in it. I say, how would you assess work that you found on the web? You'd have to communicate it well, it would have to be structured, it would have to be tagged, it would have to meet the requirements of the assignment and so on. And we create the rubric together. So then they feel a sense of ownership in the rubric, and then that's used to assess the work. And in terms of overcoming the barriers and producing OER, that's the real power, I think. I mean, most of us start by using OER, and then we adapt it, and then we mix it, but creating your own OER, so you creating your OER and sharing them publicly, across your faculty, across your institution, across Sri Lanka, but globally, is really where the power of OER is unlocked. So you can be educating people in the US and Canada and other places, just as you are borrowing their resources, so that it's truly mutual. I will type this in, sorry. Wikimedian in residence. Although I live in Ireland, I'm originally from New York, and sometimes I can speak very fast. So yeah, you have to tell me to slow down. Sorry. This was a chat from it. Someone put down a Wikimedian in residence. So those were just very flash, quick answers to some of the things that came up. I'm happy to stay a little bit longer if people want to chat, but I'm really humbled by your invitation today, and also by all of the depth of your discussions and questions. And I know this is only a dot in time, so I'm really happy to continue the discussion even after today. So thank you.
I would like to thank you very much, Catherine, for taking time off your busy schedule and being with us today and sharing your experiences and your expertise in OEP. So thank you so much. And all the participants also, thank you very much for your active participation and doing all the activities and engaging in a fruitful discussion.